The swing that moves without wind. I never used to believe in ghosts. At least, not until I moved into that house. It was an old place, tucked at the end of a quiet street, surrounded by tall oak trees that blocked out most of the sunlight. It had a small backyard, nothing special, except for one thing, a swing set. Just an old wooden swing hanging from a rusted metal frame. And no matter what time of day it was always moving. A swing that never stops. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then one night I saw it for myself. The air was completely still. The trees didn't move, the grass didn't sway, and yet that swing rocked back and forth as if someone was sitting on it. I stared at it from my bedroom window, a cold feeling creeping up my spine, and then it slowed down. Not like the wind was dying down, no, it was as if something had noticed me watching, and it was staring back. The whisper in the night. That same night, I woke up to a sound outside my window, a creaking noise, the sound of the swing moving. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I heard it. A whisper. Soft, too faint to make out, but it was there, right outside my window. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. I didn't want to look, but some terrible curiosity made me do it. And when I did, the swing was empty, but still moving. And the whisper? It didn't stop. It only grew louder, like someone was speaking right into my ear, a tragedy from the past. The next day I started asking around about the house. An old woman at the grocery store recognized my address. She gave me a long, knowing look. "You live in that house?" she asked. I nodded. She hesitated, then leaned in close. "There used to be a little girl there," she whispered. "Her name was Emily." My stomach twisted. "What happened to her?" I asked. The woman sighed. "She loved that swing," she said. "Spent hours on it, laughing and talking to herself." A chill crawled up my spine. "She was playing outside one evening," the woman continued. "Her parents thought she'd come in for dinner, but when they went to call her..." She paused. "They found her still swinging." Her voice dropped to a whisper, "But she wasn't alive anymore." I swallowed hard. "No one knows what happened," she said. "There was no sign of struggle, no injuries. It was like her heart just stopped." The woman's eyes darkened. "And ever since then," she murmured, "that swing has never stopped moving." The shadow on the swing that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emily, about how she died, about how the swing never stopped. Around 3 a.m., I finally gave in to my fear. I got up, walked to the window, and looked outside. And I froze. Because this time, the swing wasn't empty. There was something sitting on it, a small shape, a child. She was facing away from me, her long hair hanging over her shoulders, and she was swinging, slowly, back and forth, back and forth. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, her head turned. Not just a little. Her neck twisted at an unnatural angle, almost all the way around. And I saw her face, black, hollow eyes, pale, lifeless skin, a mouth that didn't move, but somehow, I still heard her whispering, "Come play with me." Leaving the house, I don't remember how long I stood there, frozen in terror. Then all at once, the swing stopped moving. Emily's figure vanished, and in the dead silence of the night, I heard soft footsteps coming from inside my room. That was the last straw. I grabbed my things and left the house that same night. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I don't know what Emily wanted, but I do know one thing. That swing is still moving, and if you ever see it, don't watch for too long. Because if you do, she might just invite you to play. The haunted train that never arrives. Trains are supposed to take you somewhere. But what if there was one that never did? A train that never stops, never lets anyone off, never reaches a destination. A train that once boarded, you can never leave. A forgotten station. It all started with a train station no one remembered. I had been exploring an old part of town, a place where the streets were cracked and the buildings looked abandoned. That's when I saw it. A rusted sign pointing down a narrow alley. Black Hollow Station. I had never heard of it before, but something about it called to me. I followed the sign, stepping into the darkness. And at the end of the alley, there it was. A forgotten train platform, hidden from the world. No lights, no people, just an old, decayed station. And as I stood there, I heard it. The distant sound of a train, the train that shouldn't exist. A deep, echoing whistle cut through the silence. Then, From the darkness of the tunnel, I saw the train emerge. It looked ancient, black metal covered in rust, its windows fogged up, its wheels screeching as it slowed. But the strange thing was, there was no one inside. Or at least, no one I could see. The doors slid open with a hiss, and I felt something, a pull, like the train was waiting for me. I don't know why, but I stepped inside. The doors immediately shut behind me, and that's when I realized I had made a terrible mistake. A ride with no end inside, the train was too quiet. The seats were old and torn. The windows were dark, as if they showed nothing but endless night. I tried to see where we were going, but there was no conductor, no map, no schedule. Just a single sign above the door. It read, "Next stop, Black Hollow." I waited and waited, but the train never stopped. Minutes turned to hours, and then I started hearing the whispers, the passengers in the dark. At first I thought I was alone, but then I noticed the seats weren't empty anymore. Shadowy figures sat silently, their heads tilted down, their faces were blurred like they didn't belong to this world. I felt their eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. And the whispers, they weren't coming from them. They were coming from the walls, from inside the train itself. I gripped the seat, my heart hammering. I had to get out. I had to leave. But then I saw the sign change. Next stop, never. And that's when I realized I was never getting off. The conductor with no face panic took over. I rushed toward the front of the train, looking for a way out. That's when I saw him, the conductor. He stood at the front, dressed in a dark uniform. But his face, it was completely smooth. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a blank, featureless face. Slowly he turned toward me, and though he had no eyes, I knew he was looking at me. His hand reached for me, and the whispers became screams. The station that doesn't exist. I don't remember what happened next. All I know is, I woke up outside the station, lying on the cracked pavement, gasping for air. The train was gone. The tracks were gone. Even the sign for Black Hollow Station had disappeared, like it had never existed. But I know the truth. It's still out there. That train, that haunted train, still moving, still picking up passengers, still heading toward nowhere. And if you ever hear a whistle in the dead of night, don't follow it. Because once you get on that train, you'll never come back. The family that disappeared without a trace. Most people who disappear leave behind some kind of clue, a note, a footprint, a broken door, something to suggest where they went or what happened to them. But the Morrison family, they left nothing. One night, they simply vanished, as if they had never existed, and to this day no one knows where they went or what took them. A perfect family, until they weren't. The Morrisons were the kind of family that made people jealous. David and Claire Morrison had 2 kids, Emma, 10, and Noah, 7. They lived in a beautiful Victorian house at the end of Maplewood Street, a perfect home in a quiet town with no reason to leave. Until one morning, their neighbors woke up to a silent house. No lights, no movement, no sign of life. At first, no one thought much of it. Maybe they left early, maybe they were on vacation. But as the days passed, the worry grew. Because inside the house, everything was still exactly as they had left it. A home frozen in time. When the police entered the house, they expected to find signs of a robbery, a struggle, something. But instead, everything was normal. Too normal. There were half-eaten meals on the table. Claire's coffee cup sat on the counter, still filled to the brim. The TV remote was on the couch with a show paused mid-scene. Even the beds were unmade, as if the family had just woken up. But the Morrisons? They were nowhere. No fingerprints leading out, no forced entry, no missing clothes, passports, or suitcases. It was as if they had been erased. A call from nowhere. Then came the phone call. 3 days after their disappearance, Claire's sister, Melissa, received a call from Claire's number. Her hands trembled as she answered. "Claire? Claire, where are you?" At first there was only silence, then a whisper, low, distorted. It sounded like Claire, but wrong. "He's here, we can't leave." Then, static, and the call cut out. Melissa tried calling back, but Claire's number was now disconnected. The black figures in the windows. Melissa wasn't the only one who noticed something wasn't right. Neighbors reported seeing shadows moving inside the house, even though it had been empty for days. At night, some swore they saw figures standing at the windows, staring out with blank faces. One man even claimed he saw Emma and Noah standing in the backyard. But when he called out to them, they disappeared, like smoke in the wind. The basement that shouldn't exist. A week after their disappearance, the police searched the house again. This time, they found something no one had ever noticed before. A door. A heavy, iron door in the basement. It was hidden behind a wooden shelf, as if someone had tried to cover it up. The officers forced it open, and what they saw inside shouldn't have existed. The room was impossibly large, too big to fit under the house. The walls were covered in strange symbols, carved deep into the stone. And in the center, a single wooden chair sat beneath a flickering light bulb, and on the floor was a black, hand-shaped stain. The tape that was never meant to be found. Inside the basement, they found a single video camera. It was old, dusty, but it still worked. They pressed play, and what they saw was never released to the public. But rumors say it showed the Morrison family, sitting together in the basement, their eyes wide with terror. Claire held Emma and Noah close, while David sat in the chair, shaking uncontrollably. The symbols on the walls glowed with a dim, unnatural light. Then, David screamed. The camera glitched, the screen filled with static. And when the video came back, the family was gone. Only the chair remained, and the black handprint on the floor. The house that won't let go. After that, no one dared to go near the Morrison house. The town eventually boarded it up, declaring it unsafe. But people say, on quiet nights, if you stand outside and listen, you can still hear them. A woman's voice whispering, "He's here, we can't leave." A child's laughter echoing through the empty halls. And sometimes, if you're really unlucky, you'll see a shadow in the window, watching you, waiting. Because the Morrisons never really left, and whatever took them is still there.